Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Lucid, and I'm once again joined by Sai.
This is fine. I'm once again joining Lucid, staying on top of the game with another live turn.
That's right. As you can see in the bottom right of your screen, the turn is about to roll. We were just waiting on TNG and Vaettiheim, so it's very possible if these guys get their acts together, because they're both logged in right now, that the turn will roll while we're recording. So that would be very exciting. We've got a bit of a chill turn, because for those of you who've missed maybe the last episode or two, the tides have turned. TNG won a major victory against xibalba. And Xibalba and Gath, who both really don't like Ilwinter being up, have managed to convince Pan, though I'm not sure how much convincing it really took, to turn on Vaettiheim. So that's going to be pretty interesting, and that's going to leave TNG to maybe pick up the pieces here. Uh,
Yeah, the deal from what we had been told was that TNG basically gets its original borders back. So it should be pretty quickly snapping back what it had lost.
so this will probably be a bit of a quick episode. There's not a lot of major combat to cover, and I think we're really just waiting for the next war to start. But anyway, we'll cover it and get through it, and first, we'll start with the messages. So we'll start here with the message from Vaettiheim. So that backfired intensely. We helped negotiate a peace for TNG. Our logic there was we didn't really want TNG to be eaten, or even if not actually killed, to have a big stalemate war that benefits other nations like Gath and Xibalba and Erythia, especially as Xibalba was getting Blood 8 and Gath had passed us in research. So we helped to negotiate a peace there. Turns out, instead of pivoting towards Erythia or Gath, Pan, Gath, and Xibalba all pivoted towards us. So naps were ended. I guess towards Erythia or Gath. Pan, Gath, and Xibalba pivoted towards us. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So they were worried. They're still one of the folks that are in the stage where they're concerned about Erythia's scaling, possibly, towards the witch farming into Armageddon stuff going on, rather than Pan doing the same thing.
Right. We're hoping it would end with a war versus Erythia or a war versus Xibalba, as we would have liked to have removed Aussie spam from the game. But Pan's general impression is that Xibalba is always able to be beaten because he doesn't have shock resistance in his bless. I don't think that's exactly true, because 150 Aussies a turn is still threatening, but oh well. I guess even threatening to war on Xibalba triggered Gath. I guess even threatening to war on Xibalba triggered Gath. And Gath is also very unhappy with Ilwinter. I expect Xibalba will be annoyed, and anyone with humans, but I didn't expect Gath would find it a big deal. But hey, can't skip Ilwinter just because people don't like it. We're Vaettiheim after all. I'll follow up with more thoughts next turn on the overall game. Out of time for now. So there's a couple things in here, Si, I'd like to get your take on. The first thing is Pan's impression that Xibalba will always be able to beat him because he doesn't have shock resistance.
Yeah, that's a little interesting. The only thing that I could think of that would tie into that to be like, oh, you can kill an infinite number of Ocelotls is something like demonic cleansing and corpse constructs, or demonic cleansing and wrathful skies. But even then, I don't think that this is just a sure thing, because Ocelotls aren't quite as totally nerfed by Storm so much as it is that Storm is just necessary to fight them at all. Because
All right.
Ocelotls are still fast. They have a cavalry speed, so they can charge across the map. So unless you have just an extremely good front line with Army of Gold and all the other buffs, such that even these magic weapons, Ocelotls with weapons of sharpness, are still just hitting like wiffle bats, then you're going to have a hard time. TNG was able to do it because they have these very high defense sacreds, right? With the Throne of Water helping them out. And they were able to stack buffs reasonably well, and they had the cubes with the acid shield. So that type of front line with demonic cleansing is kind of what you need in order to be able to beat Ocelotls. But what Vaettiheim is saying here is basically that it's hard to do that economically, because how are you going to match, your army size with Xibalba's being able to output an entire army that requires that level of investment to beat every turn?
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of my thinking too, is that it's very possible Xibalba can just have more armies than you. And, especially if they're very hesitant to take a major engagement and they have all that strategic mobility to jump around.
Yeah, Perpetual Storm would be one of the best ways to counter that.
Yeah.
But that's another global that makes people unhappy.
Right. Right. Um, So yeah, I mean, I think that it is nice that he doesn't have shock resistance. It makes it easier to kind of counter him with Wrathful Skies. But I don't even think there's that many nations that have like a ton of shock resistance. I think Gath does, right? And so does Pan. I mean, so does Tianchi.
Vaettiheim
And
as well,
Vaettiheim
actually.
does. Okay. But Pan doesn't. I mean, it wouldn't matter because Pan's a scales nation anyway.
Yeah,
So
I'm a little surprised that well, maybe Pan just thinks they can do enormous Thunderstrike communions. Just, dump 30 or 40 air random sages into their army, put up Storm, and go
yeah,
zap happy.
I mean that's possible. But then you're factoring in things like darkness being up, mist getting cast because the Balba can do that easily. Putting the Aussies in sparse lines and spreading them out. Flood
Rigor
rain
Mortis.
going up, rigor mortis, wailing winds. And it's like okay, things are starting to get a little less predictable. And then Xibalba also, I mean, just from the build they took, to me, it says that they were thinking about this like toolkit Xibalba, right? So at some
Which we
point,
have
we'll
talked
see the
quite about
Blackheart
quite a bit.
Assassins come out. We'll see all the other bullshit that Xibalba can do. So,
Yeah, we kind of talked about that quite a bit without
right.
going into like a huge amount of detail onto like what this toolkit actually is. But you mentioned a big one there actually is which I'm interested in seeing Xibalba do a lot of, which is that they can do a lot of lifelong protections and they can do a lot of black hearts. In conjunction, this makes them basically impossible to siege because between their hordes of flyers keeping up castle walls very well and their ability to essentially deploy as many assassins as they want into any given fort makes actually taking Xibalba's stuff absolutely obnoxious. And this
Yeah.
doesn't even require a significant amount of tech. Like this is tech that we know that they already have. We just haven't seen them use this kind of stuff. And then all those assassins that had those lifelong protections can go rejoin your army when you have a big fight, and then suddenly you have a fatigue play option as well, just
Yeah.
from these hordes of imps.
So I think maybe a conclusion for this is, and I think you and I both agree on this, is that while it's very clear that like TNG demonstrated there's ways to manage these huge Aussie doom stacks, the number of armies that Zabalba can potentially field and all the toolkits that, things that we haven't been seeing yet, but which we absolutely believe Fulik will be doing, probably mean that, it's not a threat to sleep on.
Right. Yeah. Xibalba scaling is not just the one thing that we've seen them deploy and get countered, but by that same token, that is the only thing that we've seen them do so far. And we have seen that get countered, right? So, like,
Right.
you can just look at the research graph and know that Xibalba is still a long way from actually being able to deploy all these scary battlefield tricks that we've been hyping up.
But most of these things that we've been talking about are not deep in research, right? They're at sixes or sevens. And Zabalba's already got a few of them, and they're going to have all the rest of the six and sevens they need pretty soon. We're talking Blood Rain, Wailing Winds, you know, all the assassin stuff is just construction six, which they already have. So it's just a question of, some of it is also just how many blood slaves are they getting a turn and what do they choose to spend it on? And hopefully we see them not do it all on Aussies now. Oh, the other thing I want to get your thought on was here at the bottom. He was like, we're Vaettiheim. We can't skip Illwinter just because people don't like it. What are your thoughts on them putting Illwinter up?
I think that Illwinter is, in fact, a big deal for Vaettiheim. I mean, it's how you get your super combatants that aren't devils. It's how you make sure that your Rimvetti can fight in any terrain. And in general, I think that, it's just a very high value spell in ensuring that you have that temperature advantage wherever you're fighting. But I also think that, like, this is one of those things where, like, if you are routinely talking to the other players, you can kind of get a gauge for who's going to be okay with it and who's not. And, it's one of those things that I don't think you have to be sneaky about. I think you can be very upfront and say, hey, we're Vaettiheim. We really want to put up the spell. This unlocks a lot of important stuff for us, all that good stuff. And make sure that you have other players that are not going to coalition you when you put that spell up. And it looks like basically they never even considered it, right? They were just like, are people going to be offended by this? Well, these players probably aren't going to mind. When in fact, it was considered to be very offensive by Gath in particular.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think too, especially if there's heat nations in the game, especially any cold blooded nations, I would just count on them hating you if you put it up. I mean, you don't even really need to ask them. They're really not going to like it. Um, so yeah, yeah. But
Yeah, and
this is one of the
Gath
things
in fact,
too. If Vaettiheim parries a bunch of shot blows here, they may actually grow out of this 3v1 because Vaettiheim is one of the best defensive nations in the game, I think. So
they do have that temperature advantage on their side. They do have that Idol of Sorcery, fantastic for dropping on armies on the move. They have Murdering Winter advantage when people are attacking into Cold 3. And of course, they have all the stealth and assassin shenanigans, which we've already seen them kind of try to deploy when they had their little trench war against Pangea.
yeah,
So Given that Pan was actually able to power through, though, I think that they're going to have trouble. I think that especially Gath, given how much stuff Gath already has on their border with just their hordes and hordes of zealots, that they might run into trouble just repulsing just that broad attack.
Yeah.
And they also need to be able to handle Gath's Doomstack, which we've already seen partially deployed. Like, we didn't see the full mage count that would be going with that when they were conquering Arco. And we've now seen even more reinforcements going into that army, with a fairy queen now joining it in 21, for example. So we're going to be
Yeah.
seeing that huge number of Cerium and Shadim in that one big stack, while also having mage support beyond what they'd already shown against Arco. And of course, looking at the research graph, they are very high up there. So they might
Hmm.
be at Alteration 9 already, with Army of Gold or Army of Lead supporting their Shadim as well.
Yeah. Gath's doing pretty good. I mean, they're in the same ballpark as Vaettiheim, but they're looking real nice there. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at Gath's message. I'm a bit envious seeing how cleanly Vaettiheim converts mages. It hints about astral corruption being close, though maybe it's just upkeep reduction. I've been debating making the Ankh for a long time, but decided against it because demons are not affected. And I have more important things to make. Maybe it was a mistake, who knows? So my mages will have to wait to be converted. And I think they're quite happy about that. Yeah. See
He's
the
guide to your mage core.
purge of the intelligentsia commencing in 3 months. All right, since Vaettiheim armies are not visible anywhere, I have no clue what and where he has it. Definitely expecting Murdering Winter, assassins, army hiding items, stealth attacks, possibly some nasty globals like Vengeful Waters or Wrath of God. Yeah, because Vaettiheim has Maelstrom, and that's a big deal, especially for nations like Gath. While Gath is going to have some of the commanders that are going to be immune to, especially like the ice elementals, water elementals are going to be threatening for everybody. But,
They are all going to be fighting in cold.
right. But they can't really use any of their kind of crappy human or near human mages. But it's going to be a lot
Yeah.
harder if vengeful water goes up. So,
Right. You need like a water bottle or lifelong protection on any of your civils that you want to deploy.
right. Um, or Wrath of God. For that reason, and because of morale, I'm blood sacking everywhere, even at the cost of magic skills dropping further in my research factory. Because research starts to become less meaningful, I'm also reasonably sure that in a fair fight, I'm stronger because of the morale advantage. I'm stronger because of morale advantage, but he is super unlikely to give me a fair fight. Also, my large fight capability is limited because I only have a single or Woven Winter. Wait, no. What is
Wailing
this?
winds.
Wailing Winds caster so far. And the second one is likely to be an air mage empowered in death and twice-born, since my death income is 6 times larger than my air income. Wow. Oh man,
Oh,
he's telling us
another
his
one, right?
research. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Research levels on turn 60. Conjuration 8, Alteration 9, Evocation 7, Construction 8, Enchantment 8, Thaumaturgy 7, Blood 8. Okay, well, gold star for him for telling us that.
Yeah. And I would definitely think that he goes Blood 9 next, just because that opens up more supercasters, including another Wailing Winds caster if you get lucky. And more importantly, it gives him much more diversity in his bulk demon armies, since his big guys, the cat mages, can random both earth and fire. So that means
Mhm.
you can do basically Infernal Crusade to get huge numbers of armored elite stat units. And those guys take buffs extremely well. So while they don't have the Omni resists that he'll have on his Zealots, they would do great matching up into stuff like Betty Berserkers.
Yeah, though the fear is a bit wasted there.
A little
But
bit.
yeah. Well, I mean, Veti Berserkers don't care about fear, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, they're really solid units. And Veti, I mean, they because of the armor, especially when you put Army of Gold on them, it's going to be really tough for even Berserkers, which hit really hard to punch through that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Unless they
And
get weapons of sharpness on them, which is not something Vaettiheim does super easily. But this Vaettiheim has Earth access, so they might be able to do it.
even with weapons of sharpness, those guys are just so tanky that like even the halved protection is like, because they're over 30 prot.
Yeah, but Vaettiheim Berserkers hit really hard, especially if he gets Rush of Strength on them. These are some of the best units in the game, I think, because with Rush of Strength, there's a two-handed battle axe, so it's going to go up +5, so it's going to be 26 damage. So
Yeah.
yeah,
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 that'll chop through them.
Yeah.
They have to hit though too.
That's true. That's true. They're going to be at 14 attack, but, you start throwing in, darkness and stuff, and all of a sudden these guys
Yeah,
can't hit as well.
Demon Knights at 17 base defense before they get experience stars,
Yeah,
including shield parry. But with that, it is good enough to tank the axe hit.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but, you also start throwing in things like demonic cleansing, which I don't think Vaettiheim's going to have yet. But if they did, all of a
Yes,
sudden now this is, instead of a 26 damage axe, it's a 56 damage axe.
yeah, that
And
kind of obviates the knights by quite a bit.
yeah,
One of the interesting things is that the devils, which are normally like very good bulk units, are actually going to have problems fighting Vaettiheim because of their base cold resist malice. So
yeah,
like they can't fight into a cold aura, like they
right.
just can't.
Yeah.
So in the cold 3 setting of trying to invade Vaettiheim, like you can basically throw out devils as an effective combat unit. One of the interesting things which we might also see are ice devils being used by other nations just for the stats on those guys.
Yeah. Ice Devils can make really great super combatants too. I mean, surprisingly good, given that they're kind of a low tier demon commander summon.
Yeah, the
Um,
death guy in particular is really good.
so let's take a look here to see if there's anything interesting. This is the sickle farming going on. For those of you who haven't seen that before, just flash that up. We've got this Lich. Here's the kit. Oh, he's got the ancient casket, so he doesn't have to spend any death gems. Cast rigor mortis.
Yeah,
And
that was kind of the way that they were doing this farming is basically via turn timer stuff. Um, but yeah, it's a very efficient kit because it's very reusable.
right. And yeah, it doesn't take up any. Well, you're getting the full haul instead of getting 30 and it costing you 3 or 4 gems to cast rigor. You make only 26 gem profit. Now you're getting the full 30 gem profit every round.
Yeah, but the most important thing is basically that the Lich the Lich can't clear the PD in time and has to
Right,
retreat every single time. That's like
right.
kind of why this works.
And you do want the Lich has really high morale, but you need a very high morale unit to do it because you're going to be doing a retreat check, which is a check against morale. And if you fail that, you're going to lose all the really expensive gear you put on them. Um, so this is interesting. Tianchi hitting Agartha here, and apparently Agartha doesn't want to give up this province. Or there was some I don't think this is a miscommunication. Because
Yeah, it
this is the
looks like
second time
Agartha
it's happened now.
this is clearly Agartha breaking the terms of what TNG seems to have agreed on with everyone else, which is getting back to their original borders.
Right. And that
I
makes
wouldn't.
sense because, if you're Agartha, you really don't like those original borders.
Yeah, TNG needs to kill Agartha. It's just
Yeah.
got to happen.
Needs to happen. A little bit more rating. This looks kind of interesting. I just want to see this. I haven't looked at it. Okay, so this is going to be a moss body.
Yeah, they're making a Celestial Warrior thug.
Yeah. But this guy's sticking around.
Yeah, you can thug too.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And they even share a square. Perfect.
Yeah, I guess these guys have high enough morale where them being a single unit's probably not a big problem.
They're really good once you get them in quantity, and TNG is absolutely getting there. They were
Yeah.
kind of one of the things I was looking forward to as like an Ocelotl killer, but TNG
Mhm.
wound up not even needing them. Like his big Celestial Soldier stack never even deployed against the Aussies.
Yeah. So I think by this turn, TNG, except for maybe a squabble here with Agartho, they basically returned to regional borders, and this has them now in a top position again.
Yeah,
So,
they clearly aren't at quite their original borders just based on how far below their height they were.
right.
But I'm not sure who all has those other provinces.
I think it's Agartha. I can see a little, well, maybe not, because
Right, that's a little,
but
like
came down.
one or two.
Is it
And
Arithia, maybe?
Oh yeah, because Arithia,
Arithia,
yeah,
yeah.
Arithia had made a separate deal ahead of time, so they got a couple. And I think Pan, it looks like Pan's keeping one or two more as well.
Yeah, I think that's also the case. So just a
Okay.
few, but they're still in the top position. And the other important thing is they lost some infrastructure, which they got back. They lost a lot
Uh,
of gems that they spent, but they didn't lose a lot of items and they didn't lose a lot of their armies. So, and really, they haven't lost that much from this coalition war because they won all the major fights.
yeah, This was actually an extremely good case of exactly what you'd been talking about near the start of the game, about how when fighting a coalition, the most important thing is winning these army battles. That's what TNG focused on, and they accomplished that beautifully. They were able to basically manage raiding fairly well, but it was clear that the emphasis, like in terms of where they were actually
Hmm.
spending their time and gems, was winning these army battles. And Pangea, neither Pangea nor Xibalba brought the sort of maid support that TNG did. And that was
Right.
the big difference, is that TNG had large numbers of mages with items and gems.
Yep.
Schwalbe had like a small number of mages that were geared up, and Pangea brought a decent number of mages without the gem investment. So, like in both cases, they didn't have nearly the level of commitment that TNG did when they were putting together their essentially doom stacks.
Right. Okay, so we've looked through the battles here. THG's got a pretty big force here. They've got a big force here. They've got some cubes building up here. Oh man, that's good province. Is that 4 or 5? 4 gems.
There's a couple provinces that are worth more gold than capitals right now, actually, as well. I think it's just, or the one that I noticed was the Golden Throne, mostly just because it was both a rich province and it gets that throne bonus.
Where's the Golden Throne again?
It's 124. It's on the border between Vaettiheim and
Ooh.
Pangea. I was just looking at that one because they'd been fighting over it, and I'm like, oh, that's 539 gold. That's a
Oh
lot.
my god. That is a lot.
On the other hand, if you look at Pangea's capital, that's at 685 right now.
Where's that here? Yeah. Ooh. Pretty good.
I mean, aside
So
from it being or growth 3, they didn't even have like bonus income luck events from the look of things.
yeah. So Vaettiheim has most of their stuff, it looks like, positioned to deal with Pangea.
They
Pangea
have a lot of
literally
their
has more sages, I think, than other units.
It's
Except for like
definitely
vampires
possible at
up
this point.
here.
You mean thralls? Yeah.
How did Pangea break into blood?
I think they just bought slaves from other folks. And then they also get blood as I think 1 in 40 random on hands.
Okay. Oh, God, that is so many Centaur sages.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to them actually deploying them in bulk. Like, not just, like, 20, but, like, 80. And just, like,
Right.
the enormous enslaved mind communions and that sort of thing.
Well, the thing is that the communions are kind of going to, like, there's really a hard limit to how many, especially in like a traditional fatigue based communion, how many masters you can have, just because you always
True.
take at least one fatigue. So I'm wondering, what can you use these guys for? Like, how can you really stack them up where they're not in a communion? Like,
I think that just getting it so that enslaved mind costs 1 fatigue is already good enough.
what if, yeah, no, that could work. What if you did, this would be really weird, but maybe possible. Like you put
Oh,
up
and
relief and you do the line, was it the reverse communion? Where basically you get these guys buffed up with power, all the path boosting buffs, and then all the other ones, and then you have them as solo actors.
after
Um,
the master's retreat.
yeah. Like if you
That'd be
wanted
a
to
little
use
weird.
vampire lords, he could even do hell power, like a full meme, and they would
Well,
be
hell power would be bad if you were doing bulk mages with that strategy.
maybe. It's a bit of I don't know the last time I've done it with like over 20 mages. I don't think you get quite as many horrors as you'd think.
Yeah, I know the spell isn't like that deadly, but I think that it would be disruptive enough, and given how many persistent horror marks you'd have, it's probably not worth dealing with.
Yeah. But it would put you at Astral 4, and you'd have what, Reinvigoration 5, or probably with Relief a lot, because you'd have Hell Power, Earth Power, and Relief. I mean, that could be, yeah, I mean, and they'd all be Astral 4.
Yeah,
So,
that would get you there. But just Power of the Spheres and Light of the Northern Star is already Astral 3.
oh yeah, that's true. Well, the thing is, the problem is if you have 80, it's really expensive to do Power of the Spheres. So that's why I was thinking,
Oh
uh,
yeah, no, and I wasn't even
yeah.
like saying no to the reverse communion so much as I was saying that you probably don't need to
Oh,
put Hell Power into it.
oh, I see, I see. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's enough to do Soul Slay, which would get the job done.
In
Um,
most cases, yeah, that would be
yeah.
pretty interesting. I think though that it's a
Probably a
little
bad idea.
risky because well, it's not so much that it's like unusable so much as it is that your army needs to survive until all your stuff wakes up and you
Right.
start the fight basically already fatigued out. So like
Yeah.
your rate of fire is going to be much lower even with earth power and relief up.
Yeah. I mean, you'll be reinvigorating 5 a turn or basically 6 a turn from being asleep. And then you'll have earth power, which kind of puts you at 10. And then you have a relief, which I think is effectively like 2 or 3. So that's going to
Yeah.
put you at like 12. So even though you're looking at like 7 or 8 turns probably to wake back up after you end the the reverse communion. So
And that's crucial, right? Like that's your
yeah.
entire mage core essentially being out of the fight until, the fight is very deep underway.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think traditional communion is the easier way to do this.
Yeah, probably.
The other thing which we've kind of talked about, which I think Gath would actually be pretty decent at because they have good nature magic, is farming the dream horrors and using
Right.
those as major combatants.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it here, but you and I have been talking about it
Yeah.
privately.
So the gimmick there, which isn't something that I'd come up with, but which I'd seen work on or I'd seen posts about working on Bogarus and then tested out and indeed does, is you cast the dream horror spell on yourself, and then you patrol it out. With Bogarus, you use the bone fiends to do that because they have spirit sight. But anyone can really do this, and Gath should have no problem using just like traditional long dead. And then you charm them or hellbind heart if you don't have nature magic. Since Gath does have plentiful nature mages, though, for them it would be pretty easy to charm. And then if you look at the stats for a dream horror, these guys are actually just really good. Like they
Yeah.
have damage reversal, very high stealth. So if you want to use them as like stealthy guys, they're hard to patrol out because they're also invisible. And then they take buffs extremely well because they have like incredibly good attack, defense, and so on. Um, Let me find one of these guys. Yeah, so they have 18 attack, 20 defense, and magic power. So since they're going to be fighting in Magic 3, assuming they're attacking Vaettiheim, then you're looking at 21 attack, 23 defense. They have armor negating damage on 2 of their attacks and armor piercing life drain on another 2. So if you put Iron Warriors or, since they've got Alt 9 Army of Gold on these guys, they become extremely hard to kill. So
Yeah.
while their base hit points is really low, they can get it back via life drain. And because they're just kind of really hard to hit and have damage reversal, which means that even if they do get hit, you have to pass an MR check in order to deal damage to them. They become absolutely monstrous. And then because they're teleporters, they don't even have the flying disadvantage of being in the air. And then, of course, they don't worry about encumbrance. So they're basically like the ideal super unit, but they're expensive and awkward in order to get.
Yeah. They also, like horrors, don't have any resistances. So that's one of the main horror weaknesses normally.
Right.
And you can fix that in an army or, if they're buffed. And they also have, I think, a miscellaneous slot. So you can put an eye in there if you want to. But the other problem with them is that there's basically a 1 in 20 chance they desert every turn.
You don't want to
Um,
invest too much into gearing them at the very least.
right. So that, that's always a risk. But yeah, like Vaettiheim doing Frozen Heart stuff would be pretty strong against them. But, they do have damage reversal and they'll probably get, frozen by Chillars and stuff. But they're a super good unit. I'd love to see that get used. I wouldn't expect it. We shouldn't keep our hopes up. There is a chance, because we're on turn 59 right now, that if the game goes for 30 more turns, which would be turn 90, people may hear this recording and then start doing it, and we might get to see it by the end. But this is not a very well-known strategy. I'd never heard of it until Si mentioned it to me. So,
Yeah, and also, I think it's because of how expensive it is to set up. It's more of like a very turtley game or victory lap style strategy rather than something that like you can use reliably in order to like superpower your nation.
right. Okay. So, Vaettiheim, a lot of stuff on the Pangean border. And, God, Xibalba's moved a bunch of stuff over here. Did Gath mention in his message when this thing's starting?
I think we got countdowns from people last turn.
Okay, let me
Like
pause.
the
We'll go check. Okay, so we went and checked. And, Si, what did we find?
Oh yeah, so naps are going to be ending on turn 61 and 62.
Yeah. So we're on turn 59 here. So that means I believe we have 2 more turns apiece. So we're not going to get to see any cool battles, I don't think, for the
Yeah, the
next
one
2 turns.
exception is apparently Erythia does not have a nap with them, but I don't think Erythia borders them. So I'm not sure why they were like included in that count that Gath had
Well,
sent
they have
us.
a border now. A small one. But yeah.
Erythia?
Erythian. Oh. I think that
Like
was the
Vaettiheim?
naps with Gath. I think that was the message we got from him. I thought that was Gath, which naps Gath had, but
Oh, I thought that was counting down the war against Vaettiheim.
oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. We'd have to go back and check. But yeah, Arithia definitely doesn't have a border with Vaettiheim, so wouldn't make sense for them to have a nap with them. Mm. Yeah, really hard to say. I wonder how we know that the goblins have been keeping stealthy armies around. To me, that's one of the big variables in this is how much of the Vaettiheim army can we see? Um,
Yeah, because even when they were, like, planning on fighting TNG, and they were very open about having most of their army on the TNG border, they'd also told us straight up that a lot of it was stealth, like, just to
yeah,
begin with.
yeah. The other thing that's going to be interesting potentially, I really wonder what their research is. If they have wrathful skies and demonic cleansing, there could be some really interesting because we know they can make storm staffs because they have higher on their god. We could see some really interesting stuff from Vaettiheim here.
Yeah, I think that demonic cleansing is honestly the biggest thing that Vaettiheim can do, in part just because of how much or how well it's going to work with stuff like rigor mortis and their auras. Like with demonic cleansing, they can very easily put the seer armies to sleep.
Yeah, and enchantment is something that Vaettiheim wants anyway. Like they definitely want like rigor mortis and stuff. This is like core Vaettiheim play, so that gets you all the way up to 6. I don't know if we've seen anything that gives evidence that they have. I mean, Serpent's Blessing is also nice with Scales Vaettiheim armies. So
Right,
it's
they don't
probably
have
of
poison
7.
resist in their bless, so they
Yeah.
almost like. And then mass regeneration in 8. That's another really good one.
Yeah. If they're at 8, they can probably get up to 9 before the war starts. That would be huge. That would be super huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that demonic cleansing is really like the clincher for what they need in order to decisively win fights against both xibalba and gath. And since they're fighting both of them, like that just seems super important to me.
Yeah, and it seems like with Pan, we don't have huge armies over here. Like it's like mostly sages, but like I mean at most Pan's going to put together like what? Like 300 troops? That just is like even if Pan wins the raiding war, Pan's not going to be like decisively taking infrastructure with the kind of Pan armies we're seeing here right now.
Yeah,
Um
honestly, if they don't seriously upgrade the armies that they used against TNG, there's no way that they're going to beat Vaettiheim stacks.
right. Um So, and if Pan's putting together this, hey, let's coalition different people and we'll kind of poke at them and send some sages to die. That means Vaettiheim really can just focus on Xibalba and Gath, which means if they have demonic cleansing, like if they can just pass that line, they can potentially have to start decisively winning. And that'll throw the world into real turmoil. Like if Vaettiheim wins against Xibalba and is winning against Gath and holding off against Pan, the other players are going to start having to ask questions like, okay, do I vulture, you know, or do I attack Vaettiheim? And I think a lot of players are going to probably look to vulture. Like, I
Yeah,
don't think,
someone like Arithia, I think, would have to vulture in that situation.
yeah, I think it would make more sense for TNG and Arithia to start vulturing these nations than to come in and try to like punch Vaettiheim in the face while he's winning wars against Gath and Xibalba.
Yeah. And the other thing is that Xibalba in particular has basically nothing right now in the tank other than these Ocelotl hordes. So
Right.
they already lost a huge number of them to TNG. If Vaettiheim inflicts similar or even bigger losses in their own war against Xibalba, Xibalba's just going to be paper. Like at that point, anyone,
Yeah.
even like someone like Arithia, could go in and start taking their stuff. And since TNG has already proven to be able to beat Xibalba's armies, they can just swoop in and start snatching land.
Yeah. I'm sure if we see 300 Aussies die to Vaettiheim, there's an extremely high chance that Tianchi just ends their nap and kills Xibalba.
Yeah, and at
Because
that
they're gonna
point,
have Xibalba, they're gonna have demonic cleansing for the next Xibalban conflict. So
yeah. At that point, we'll have to see Xibalba trying to pull out those tricks. And TNG's been very good at countering that sort of thing, or
yeah.
just countering what Xibalba can deploy in general. And again, Xibalba's persistent weakness continues to be their lack of research. And given that they're devoting even more stuff to blood hunting, like they haven't ramped up their research that dramatically, but they have continued to increase their blood hunting operations. Just hunting more and more provinces after they got that Joman land. Um,
Yeah. let's take a look here just at Xibalba and TNG. And I want to see how Xibalba's income is doing. Okay, it's fine. Wait, when did the TNG conflict start? Here. So it's actually, this is when the conflict started. You can see this is right here. And I'm going to flip it back. That's right here. So they're actually lower income than they were before the TNG war started. And
Well,
that's not due, I don't think, to them giving up land to TNG. I mean, obviously they returned it, but I think they've just been blood hunting the shit out of their stuff.
they have, yeah. And you can also kind of see that just if you look on the map at like the lands that they took off of Joman, for example, and you actually, yeah, the stuff they've taken off of Arco as well. Like those things are saturated with corpse constructs, beast bats, and wolves.
Yeah. Yeah, these things are getting blood hunted to the ground. Yeah, like this province should be giving like 140 gold a turn, and it's giving 26.
Yeah,
It-
131 unrest.
yeah,
That'll do it.
he's just destroying the population. So, in some ways, this kind of puts the bulb on a clock. Like they don't have a ton of money. They actually they kind of on one hand, ill winter's a problem, but they actually need this war with Zabalba. They need more land to feed the machine. Like they're kind of burning their lands to the ground right now. And the more they burn the lands to the ground, the harder it is for them to make their good mages. So
Yeah, the other issue that they're running into is basically that their research continues to lag behind. Not even just that they aren't growing, but just that, or sorry, not even just that they're already behind, but just that they're not growing. Like their research graph hasn't
yeah.
made any serious uptick whatsoever. So I don't know,
Oh,
like,
we just missed this. I didn't know. But at some point, he destroyed his cap and replaced it with the Citadel of Power.
oh, with the 3 red seconds thing.
Yeah.
That's a good idea, actually, because the Kamizots are cap boldly, and those guys are really important to all this battlefield magic.
Yeah. Yeah. And, he does want some of these guys for the Holy Three path. So
Yeah,
it
Holy
gives
Three
you.
and the big Earth stuff. Like he's using
Right.
one of the there's the weapon, the Sharpness Caster.
Right. 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 So that was a pretty cool little upgrade he snuck in there.
He's not the only one actually that demolished one of their forts. If you look at Atlantis, Erythia has demolished Atlantis, I believe.
Oh. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Well,
so
what is
they're
it? Huh.
so Atlantis it was an ice fort, which means that it melts.
Oh.
So it was functionally a palisade. Like it had no bonus commander points because it was melted. So he is probably going to be just recasting that with the Earth spell,
Yeah.
but he might build it from the ground up.
Okay.
Either way, he got rid of the old ice thing.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting as hell. Okay. That's super cool. I was like, wait, is he going to whip out some 3 red seconds just to show us what's up? And we don't see any signs of a blood economy from him, I don't think. A tree
Yeah,
lord's here?
he could wish for slaves, empower some dudes, and start getting some semblance of an economy going. But he definitely hasn't gone and actually put serious effort into getting into blood in the same vein that Pangea and TNG did. Like both Pangea and TNG actually focused on in TNG's case, they were doing the Zotsub because they have that blood searcher bonus. They were using
Right.
those to get into vampire lords. And then Pangea similarly was doing I think they got a blood random pan really early, and then they were also buying blood slaves. And then they also clearly have vampire lords now as well. So we
Yeah.
have these fledgling blood economies going from most of the non-blood nations, but we haven't seen Erythia put together a similar
I
scaling thing.
I don't think we have. You haven't seen a vampire lord for TNG yet, have you?
I don't think so, but I remember that he mentioned something to that effect.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see
That
any
might be
thralls, which are
misremembering.
normally the giveaway.
Yeah.
But
I do remember that he was blood empowering the Zots for the blood search bonus, and he was doing that fairly early on, I think 30 turns ago at this point.
yeah, see if we have any. I haven't really been looking for discount sites. Let's see if
Yeah,
Pan.
we haven't done it. Well, we did a sweep on that one time, right? Where we went through and we saw Xibalba's Sacrificial Grove, so they get the 20 bonus.
All
We saw
right.
TNG's Enchantment bonus site. And I think there was one in Pythium territory. Well, I guess oh yeah, that's the one that TNG owns now, the Enchant 30 site.
Right. 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 Right.
Um,
Right.
I don't remember if Pangea had anything.
Yeah, that's where he's doing the cube summoning. So he's getting really cheap cubes out of that.
Yeah, he's getting cheap cubes, cheap liches, and I think that's it because I definitely don't remember seeing him do mass long dead horsemen, which are that's the other one that you often do when you get that discount site.
Right, right, right. Okay. Well, cool. Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much like you're saying, everybody's powering up in blood. We haven't really seen a lot of TNGs, but pans we can start to see. I can understand why pan just does not feel on the clock. I think we're going to see a huge freaking global in about 15 turns.
That late, huh?
Yeah. I
I
mean,
guess we'll have to wait and see what the game state is like. But yeah, I think that Pan absolutely could put up Nexus or something similar much sooner than that.
oh, we could. I think he doesn't want to get coalition. But the only thing, this one doesn't make sense, is if you want to put up that global, you want to be bigger than this when you put it up. Like you want to have, unless you have a big ally, like unless he does it with the Rethea or TNG.
My concern is that he does it with Gath and then gets himself outscaled.
Yeah, well, that could happen. Yeah, that would be the wrong choice, I think.
Yeah, I
Um,
think I actually agree with you that it would have made more sense to put it up when one or two more players were out of the game. Um, but when you look at it from that perspective, then you probably wanted to actually kill TNG, for example, which he didn't do.
yeah,
Like he didn't, he didn't make
he
enough of a
didn't even
commitment
really
in order.
try. We can't say it
That's what
was
I
a real
mean. Yeah,
try. Yeah,
yeah. Like he didn't put enough of a commitment into actually so that his armies would seriously threaten to kill TNG. Like
yeah,
Xibalba looked scary for a second there, right before TNG actually smashed that army. Like it looked like it was going to be touch and go for a while.
yeah,
But yeah, the other one who he could try to kill is Arithia, and they seem to be just total pals.
yeah, yeah. We'll have to see. Okay. Well, what are your closing thoughts here? We've kind of just rambled since there's not much happening in the turn.
Yeah, I think like given that most of the turn was, as you pointed out, just the rambles of like us judging the game state and like what each of these players' priorities might be, that we're really just gonna have to wait and see.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Do you think Vaettiheim's going to get knocked out of the game, or do you think they're going to survive?
I think they'll live. My bet is that Vaettiheim wins multiple decisive battles. Whether that ends the coalition or whether this one's going to be more determined than TNG is, it's hard to say. But I actually would bet on TNG winning at least a couple of these Doomstack battles against Gath and whatever Pangea.
Vaettiheim, not TNG.
Sorry, yeah, Vaettiheim
Yeah.
is going to win at least a couple of these Doomstack battles against Gath and whatever Pan puts together. And yeah, we'll have to wait and see what Xibalba is going to be doing, because if they send unsupported or mildly supported Ocelotls into like Vaettiheim having the entire rainbow of battlefield spells on their side, they're going to get smashed as well. It's basically just going to be a matter of resources. So like TNG's defense was very expensive, for example, right? Like just in terms of how much commitment it took to set up those armies, like, they had to
Right.
spend a ton of gems to do that. Vaettiheim is going to need to do that same thing, but they're most likely going to be facing similar or possibly even more difficult threats coming from multiple flanks, and getting multiple of the like such, army killing stacks of their own setup is going to be expensive. So I think that Vaettiheim, while I don't expect them to die, like I mentioned, I expect them to win some decisive engagements. They might just get attritioned down badly enough that it like very seriously cripples their chances of winning the game.
Yeah. That's a reasonable take. Yeah, I think it depends a lot on how committed these guys are to actually killing them. And the thing is, if the goal is taking down Illwinter, like if that is the mission, that's going to be a hard freaking mission to do.
And
Like
you
you
need to
kind of
kill
have to
them.
kill him. So that's not going to be like, oh, hey, let's beat up TNG and kind of shake him down for his money. It's like, no, we need to put this guy out of the game.
I think
And
that's Gath's goal. Like I
yeah,
genuinely think that Gath wants to like kill Vaettiheim dead.
right,
And Xibalba wants to loot. That's what Xibalba wants.
right,
Pan is the only one whose goals I don't have as an easy time reading.
yeah,
I think that Pan, like you'd mentioned, probably wants to just keep the game going for a while. Like I think that that's a fair assessment. But I think that at some point they do need to grow,
yeah,
and they need players to drop out of the game. Like they can't just, let's say that Gath wins, right? Like or wins their big engagements and just steamrolls Vaettiheim on their side. If Pangea is doing low commitment stuff and their side of the map isn't making any progress, like they're just getting stalemated along their border, Xibalba's bouncing around but not really taking forts, that kind of thing, then Gath is going to take all the land. And then you're going to wind up in like kind of a monopolar situation where Gath can conceivably take on the world and win.
yeah. Okay. Viewers, if you've made it this far, I want to thank you. But I also want to ask you, put in the comments, do you think we have the current turn? You have no access to other information. Do you think Vaettiheim is going to survive? Here are the three options. Do you think they're going to survive? Do you think they're going to die? Or do you think they're going to thrive? Let me know. And Sai, as always, thank you for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks for hosting.
All right. We'll see you guys next time. Take care.